So thanks for coming, and I guess we'll get started here. I'm going to talk about a couple of things today, a little bit just about what we've been doing from an IBM perspective on blockchain, in terms of our work with sort of Fabric, what we're offering from a platform perspective, and then that'll kind of lead into a couple of customer use cases and some kind of what I think I call them key takeaways from those engagements, right? Things that we actually learned. I think we have 35 minutes, so I'll try to do this in like 20, 25 minutes so we can at least take some time for some questions. And just as by quick way of introduction, you can read that. So I'm Gary Singh, CTO of Blockchain at IBM. I was just laughing with Arnaud. I'm actually ironically based out of Boston, which we're in that room. My job is, so I have two sides of my job. I'm on the Hyperledger Fabric side, on the maintainer side there, and actually write code over there. And I also run the team that builds the IBM Blockchain Platform, which is our distribution of that, and work with a number of our key customers. So, I think overall, I'm not sure sometimes I think people associate, there's Hyperledger, there was Hyperledger Fabric. I think people know IBM work on Hyperledger Fabric. That's great. We do a lot of work in open source, and that really is the core of what everything we do on the blockchain side is actually based on. But I'll probably get in trouble for saying this. I mean, we're not, I think we do have a strategy of not just everything being, we believe that all the code needed to be in open source, right? We think that all blockchain, especially if you're going to have trust commitments, et cetera, that it should be done in open source, that there should be a community around it, that we want to have a governance model, and obviously we want to have as much participation, as possible from many companies. And, we've got a number of big companies that participate, some that can be considered on the business side competitors, and then small companies as well. All contributions are always welcome. So what do we do from that perspective? So we obviously leverage and engage in the community, try to help out there. You saw my identities in there, by the way. If you want to find me in the community, my name is Master Singh 24, because it seemed like a good name. Because I thought I was a master, and my number in college was 24. We do a lot of work out there. Now, on top of that, what we really do is we looked at how do we actually take the sort of open source, right, and add what I call sort of enterprise qualities to it, right, in terms of how to run it, how to operate it, how to have it fully supported, right? Because you can take open source, but this would be similar to how many people use Red Hat or even a Ubuntu distribution versus I know Mark uses Red Hat, that's why I mentioned that for Mark, versus trying to build your own Linux distribution, right, which is possible, right? So we wanted to start to look at what are the value adds that we can build above and beyond the actual software itself, right, and leverage all the capabilities that Fabric has, some of them more complex sometimes than people might like, but what are the best practices around that? And we kind of call that our IBM Blockchain Platform. And that's mainly, I'll talk about that in the next few slides. We're also involved, and that's more on our product side. And just so people know, I think there's a confusion out there. We don't actually modify the Fabric source code at all. So the IBM distribution of Fabric is actually the Fabric code. We don't even maintain an internal repository of it. I don't allow that, and the people who do it actually work for me, so I can measure them on that. Because we wanted to make sure that the code that we put out there is compatible, right? You've probably saw announcements from AWS. You've seen, Oracle. Microsoft has it in their cloud as well. We wanted to make sure that if people do use the technology, right, from the raw Fabric level, they can move across that and pick pick an implementation, a platform of their choice, right, in that case. At a higher level, and I'll talk about this towards the back end of my presentation, we do work on a bunch of solutions. So primarily from solutions that we actually deliver, and I'll talk a little bit about food trust at the end. We actually built two solutions where we are actually members of the actual consortiums or networks themselves. I'm sure everybody has seen our marketing on this, so it should come as no surprise. Food trust, a big one with Walmart, and again, I'll talk about some of the lessons there. We also do a network called TradeLens. That's a global trade digitization with Maersk. And then internally, we actually run a few solutions as well. So we've had a lot of experience actually on what it takes to actually build and set up consortiums, as well as actually run and operate networks and build solutions on top of that. And then the third area is to try to grow the ecosystem, right? And the ecosystem includes people in the community, but other partners, people who might want to build solutions, add-ons, and value adds to our over solution. So in a nutshell, that's our fundamental strategy, all driven from the lowest level, though, from the open source side. I'm going to talk mostly just from the Hyperledger side. Today, I'll obviously talk mostly about Fabric, because that's sort of the key thing in our platform. We do actually do work with Indy as well, and we've been doing some engagements. We don't have any formal product offerings around that, but we have been doing some engagements based on the Indy technology in the identity space as well, looking to see how we'll sort of evolve that into a combination of potentially the blockchain space, but also just the decentralized identity space as well. If you have any questions on that, feel free to stop by the booth later. We can talk about that. I won't cover that in these slides. So, look, I mean, I think the main thing I just wanted to say on this slide, there's a couple of new things that are happening, right? I think we do, from an IBM perspective, you don't have to use everything we have, but we do offer the full gamut and range of services, as I said. We offer the open source side. We offer the product platform side, running in the cloud. I'm going to talk about our other distributions that we have as well. And we do have consulting services and solution platforms as well. And you can pick to work with us on all of that. We do believe that actually makes us very unique actually in this space. Our focus on the actual, what we call our IBM Blockchain Platform, right, has really been to how do we make it easy for, one thing is there's, people love to look at the sort of, technology, I think, right? I think we're somewhat past the stage, maybe. I mean, it's fun, and believe you me, I'm a low-level computer science guy. I love talking about low-level consensus protocols and all that fun stuff. At the end of the day, right, you have to come up with what's your value proposition and use case that you're trying to do. What problem are you actually trying to solve, right? And can you prove out, is blockchain viable for that? Is it feasible for that, right? What we wanted to try to make happen was, yes, in the open source, go learn about the technology, read the code to your heart's content if you want to, but now how am I going to make it easy for you if you want to build a trade finance solution, or you actually just want to build, some type, whatever offering it may be, a food trust or a supply chain offering, right? How do we make it easy to develop on that? The other piece is once you've got past that point, one of the hardest points is actually how do you get this thing up and running? I mean, you heard about trust, earlier this morning, and apparently, from what I gathered from that conversation, that only public blockchains are interesting, but we probably don't need them, and permission blockchains aren't that interesting, but you can do it other ways. But the interesting thing on there was the trust, right? So how are we going to set these things up, right? I mean, if you know about Fabric and you know about the number of things, right? It's a permission network. We have this concepts of organizations. You divide up peers. You divide up the trust model, the consensus model. Who's going to provide ordering? What are the rules, on channels? And while all the technical plumbing is there, how do we make that simple, easier to do? Right? And what are the common policies that people want to do, right? Who has to approve that we add a new person to the network, right? And how do those tools match with might actually be, as Bruce kind of alluded to, actual documents, right? There are consortiums that have legal entities that have legal documents that actually govern the processes by which new people will be added, who will write the code, who will be responsible for that, right? So how do we have a set of tools that also can enforce and map around those policies? And the last part is really provide a service around helping to kind of run pieces of this network for people. And again, I look at it as kind of what part of the value stack do you want to focus on? Clearly, like I said, we put the thing out in open source. The documentation has gotten better about how to run it. You can choose to run it yourself, right? But as you start becoming part of a big network, it becomes part of your business. Do you want to focus more value on the operational side of this particular piece, or on building out the value of the network, the smart contracts, et cetera? So we chose to focus on those pieces. That's our basic premise across this was to reduce the risk, make projects successful. Hopefully we make things quicker for you. We do believe that we've especially taking the fact of that we use the stuff ourselves. We set up our own networks. So we know what it takes to keep these products up and running. How many peers do you need to run, for example, right? How many regions should you run them in, right? What do you do about backing up the identities, making it kind of enterprise ready? And of course, as I said, if you choose that you don't like us anymore, we want you to be able to move, right, to wherever you want to or however you may want to do your implementation, right? And that's the nature of staying open and using the open source technology. So I just wanted to cover, quickly through what we actually kind of offer today. And I'll preface this by saying, originally we started out cloud first. So we started out basically, our distribution of Fabric, the IBM Blockchain Platform, was essentially a cloud first solution. You can say cloud native, cloud first, and we're IBM, so it was IBM Cloud. And in the beginning, that made a lot of sense because, a lot of times networks were more, pilot networks, or you had a single entity that was kind of like the backbone of the network, more as coming up with the idea and inviting people. And they were probably even bringing in players that didn't want to they didn't even know sometimes that blockchain was under the covers and wanted to sort of operate it. And operating it all in one place, made sense just from that perspective, especially from a risk, minimizing risk perspective. So we have, two of our own cloud plans that I'll talk a little bit about. But we've also now, sort of moved to the model as people have been advancing that, we should really run this stuff like the software itself, right? Fabric software runs anywhere. So some people will falsely tell you in their claims, their company, that we only run on the IBM mainframe and it only runs on the IBM mainframe. Well, that's absolutely untrue. The software will run anywhere. People do run it anywhere, and we have multiple cloud providers. But we wanted to also be able to expand and extend, I think, our expertise into those platforms as well. So we've started to introduce offerings that you can now run yourself. You can buy, our typical software distribution model on top of our Kubernetes distribution. We've also done some work to move our peer into AWS. And we also kind of have an offering at the end of the day, if you start to feel yourself in trouble and need, some level of support, and you chose to just, download and use we have these images that are, basically just non-licensed images. We do offer support on those. So we started out kind of with the life cycle of what we called our starter plan. And, I don't know how many people are actually familiar with Fabric? Okay, so pretty good. So and I know this is supposed to be more business side, but at the end of the day, some of the big things you wanted to get started on starter plan, right, are two things, right? You wanted to be able to quickly deploy your smart contracts and logic and apps, right? You wanted to be able to make that because that's the value that you're showing to line of business. And then number two, you might not have all your partners lined up, right? Your consortium, I know it's hard to even get agreements in there, and then it's actually pretty hard to actually get people to, sign up to two groups to agree to do anything together, right? Just from timing, resource, et cetera. But you might want to actually prove out, what would this look like if I have, 7 banks in the consortium, right? How does this all work? So one of the things that we actually did in there was basically to allow you to quickly spin up a multi-organization simulation, right? So you can just say, here's my 10 banks, here's what it would look like, and kind of show that value. It also allows you to go bring in and show your, if you're running a pilot, to actually go show one of these partners, right, that, hey, here's what it would actually look like. You would actually have this node, et cetera. So that was really what we went for on this sort of starter plan. And we've actually had very good adoption on that, both in the sort of POC development and even pilot phase. The next phase was, what do we have from a sort of production perspective, right? And that you guys can read this as much as I can, but this was essentially, how do we have production, how do we provide all the take all the operational responsibility out of your hands and provide the resilience that you need, right? If you're moving this thing to go run, pseudo, somewhat mission critical application, right? How do you make sure that, the data's still there, that your nodes are up and running, that data's backed up, and even still in the early days here, even things like how do you restore data? If you chose to have a checkpoint because somebody, messed up something in the application, right? How do we do that? So those are really the things that we kind of put together in the enterprise plan. And we essentially had these two plans, through the middle of this year. But as we started to evolve, I'm going to skip that one. As we started to, evolve later, one of the things that came up were, hey, I've started my consortium, right? And Food Trust might be a good example of this. But, hey, we want to bring on XYZ company, but XYZ company has a contract with Azure or AWS, right? Or Oracle, right? How do we allow those guys to kind of connect up their peer, join the network, but still, how could you actually support that? Or how can you, make part of that in there? So in our first phase, just by we just kind of picked it because it was probably the most demanded at the time. We actually started to implement the ability to deploy the first stage of our stuff. We just deployed the peer out there today, but kind of fully managed peer supported by IBM running on AWS. Moving forward, we're going to move, we'll move the entire stack to AWS. I know AWS has their own AWS managed blockchain service. Ours is better, no, but it is. But we do realize that AWS has a lot of other compelling services, et cetera, right, that people may use. They have that contract. So how do we provide that same level of support, all of our tooling, et cetera, right, to actually support nodes running in multiple clouds? And how do you get, an aggregate view, right, that you could actually be a node running in AWS and the ordering service is running somewhere else, and you want to have the management tool to govern and create channels and participate in that. In our environments today, we require you to be all in IBM Cloud. In our environments coming up through 1Q and 2Q, this is the first foray into that. We'll allow kind of basically nodes can be anywhere. They can be run by, they can either be ours, licensed from us and managed by us. They could actually be other people's nodes, and our tooling will seamlessly make that network all work together. The AWS peer is kind of our first foray into that. On the side of distributing it to run it wherever you want, within your own data center, or you just want to run something, however you want to deploy it in whatever environment may be. We also wanted to have a distribution there. We kind of believe that at least for people who want to try to set up multiple components, do sandboxes, et cetera, and I think this is true on the open source side, and if you ask Mark from Red Hat and other companies, Kubernetes seems to be the best orchestration, the predominant, I would say it's the best, but I'll just say, to be fair, the predominant orchestration platform out there. Even Docker, right, is actually supporting Kubernetes. So we have a IBM distribution of Kubernetes called IBM Cloud Private. So we support a distribution that combines basically our support of Kubernetes with running all of Fabric on that as well. And that's kind of the first foray. And then, as I said, in probably like second quarter, next year, we'll look to expand that to actually run, for example, natively on your own IKS or AKS, OpenShift. AKS, well, we'll obviously run on OpenShift because you probably saw that we announced that we're acquiring them, so that makes sense. So we'll run on that. We'll use AKS, Azure's Kubernetes service, and EKS, Amazon's Kubernetes service, and GCE as well, right? So we'll basically move our model to have native support for basically any Kubernetes. You'll be able to have all of our tooling, and those of you who've seen that, it has the ability to deploy peers, configure orderers, configure CAs. So all of that will actually work. We'll just seamlessly deploy our tool into the Kubernetes cluster and be able to work in any Kubernetes. So that's kind of where we've started to look at this whole model. And as I said, if somebody chose to run their own version of it or the peers, they'd still be able to take, for example, our management tools, et cetera, and register either other people's peers or even their open source or supported through some other vendor within there. So that gives us this vision, right, of blockchain at its best, right? It's not one vendor controlling the software. It's not one vendor controlling the cloud. It's not one organization controlling everything. We can now actually leverage all the great things that are actually in Hyperledger Fabric, and we can offer you, a version of, we can support you wherever you need to be, and we can also help support networks that want to work with IBM, but they have other members that don't. How do we support those hybrid networks as well? And all of this stuff was really, this all makes sense, right? And we could have started out. And I think it's now that we're seeing that the market's actually ready for that, right? We're seeing more and more of those times where the main set of people have gotten started, the foundation is in, and now they're looking to add the new, the latest and greatest member or whoever it may be to their network, and they bring these other requirements to you. So that's really, our core direction. So again, if you didn't listen to anything I said, to sum it all up, we also have there's other requirements that are out there, right? And not every, and believe it or not, even across all the clouds in the world, right? AWS, IBM, Azure, Google, there are still places in the world where there's not a cloud. I know it's very hard to believe, but there actually are places that aren't a cloud. And you do need to have the ability to deploy, into those infrastructures, and you might want to support a thing. So we want to make sure that we, give you that fully supported model. We want to make sure that you don't have to just pick us. You can still get support from us if you want to work with us, but we want to make sure that we can have all those networks in there. And that's really going to start to help expand the network, right? Because you don't want to have the thing to say, hey, our network requires you to run on IBM. I don't like IBM, right? We want it to be the network that people shouldn't know, right? They should just know that I've got my peers, here's my consortium, there's a network of things. Do I want to join this network because I need to be part of the supply chain? Or am I going to join this network because Walmart has mandated that I must provide freshness for greens in food trust, right? So how do you break down those barriers? By allowing deployment anywhere. We'll pass these charts out, but this was just trying to show that I think we're doing pretty well across that. There will be a presentation later. We don't deploy into Oracle Cloud, but we actually support interoperability between our stuff, any Fabric and Oracle back and forth. And as I said, our tooling will work there, and Oracle's tooling will work with our stuff. There's actually, I think Mark's actually doing a presentation on that later today. And I mentioned this earlier. And just in case people on the development side, do want to see something, one of the other things that we did do, and for now we've open sourced this, but we've kind of kept it through IBM as of right now, but we can consider where we release this. Based on all the work we've done with writing smart contracts and making this easier for people to get started, we have just recently released a new development tool as a plugin to VS Code, again, to really aid and quickly speed up development as well, right? And we see those as kind of the focus areas that we can work on moving forward. All right, so that's kind of where the platform's evolved to, what we have today and where we're going. And a lot of that, as I said, comes from our experience working with existing customers. I wanted to just run quickly, I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, for a couple of use cases and bring out some key points. I don't expect everybody to read all of these slides, but you've probably seen announcements out there. So an early member of Hyperledger was CLS. CLS, basically, you can read all about CLS, but at the end of the day, they do massive compression for multilateral netting for cross-border currency settlement, right? One of the things that and they do it for like 60 currencies, some number like that. One of the things that they wanted to start looking at was can we more easily add other currencies and at least provide some of our netting services? We already have a consortium of banks. How can we add those and just add those into the system? And since we need to do some new development anyway, distributed ledgers look interesting for this technology, so why not, let's pick blockchain for this, right? And they were very interested in it. They had looked at other things like just using Cassandra and other things before, but they believed they needed at least some of the, how do I deal with at least the trust and permission issues that blockchain could bring to bear. Now, they took an interesting model, and the reason why, I'll bring this up on my next slide, but you can read the quote on there, but one of the, some of the key takeaways from this engagement on what can be successful that we've seen out there. So CLS has an advantage in that CLS is already already has a group of member banks, right, that work together, right? And they have a compelling need to do things. And the ability to, like, for example, add new currencies becomes an interesting thing for them, right, to add into that model. So it's, the business relationships are in place, the use case is kind of in place, right? So it made it a little bit, we didn't have like that, we were over that hurdle, once we started. The other thing that was in here was, initially the promise of the use case, right? It was a combination, right? Because I think people were incented to have the novelty of blockchain and to be relevant by saying they were doing something with blockchain, so that was good. But the use case itself is actually what kind of drove the project forward, more so than just saying, hey, blockchain is the answer, what's the problem, right? They really pitched more what problem are we actually solving. The other thing, was, now I believe everybody can look and do things on their own. I think that's, great. CLS took an interesting approach, was we're going to join Hyperledger. We know that we're not going to actually be allowed, basically, to contribute code, and we don't want to be the people like building and maintaining and learning the core plumbing, because we want to build the netting, right? But they chose to want to have influence, on the community and the direction, so they actually chose to join, Hyperledger, and then we had a relationship with them anyway from previous stuff and working with us, early along the path. And the key point that came out of that was a lot of times we hear, feasibility studies and naysayers about the technology, or the technology's not ready, right? Or I need feature XYZ, so I'm not going to use it today. Or the worst case is, somebody commits, this happens to us, we need, this feature right now, so we divert our roadmap. You'll find, actually, that by the time you align what it actually takes to get things going from a business perspective, passing even your internal operations and delivering platforms, if you're able to evolve as the platform evolves, whichever underlying platform is, if it's Fabric, it could be whatever, right? Generally speaking, if the roadmap has the features on the alignment that you want it to be, you can align your development and delivery to that. And in the end, those two actually staying the course, the bottom line is technology will usually end up delivering before the business is actually able to put the thing up for non-technical reasons. And I think a lot of times people make the mistake thinking that they have to solve every problem up front, that they won't start a project if a feature's missing, or we want to work around this right now. But if you actually kind of just incrementally stay the course, get the key things, right? In the CLS case, it led to channels and a few other things, right? We needed some privacy or separation, but they still inherently proved out that the stuff could work, right? And that was a big part of it. And then they knew as these features came along and they were influencing them because they were able to talk to the community, that we were able to keep the technology moving along as they needed to meet their implementation. And that's a really important point because, look, we've actually made that mistake ourselves, right? We have a customer, we're like any company that's out there, and they say, hey, we need XYZ, and we do XYZ. Even though XYZ was planned in order, like 3 months out, we double down and try to get it done, tomorrow, right? And that usually just throws like the whole balance off. So I think, being able to align that, and if for the technical folks out there in line of business, right, this is where you have to figure out how to meet innovation and execution, right? Because in pure innovation, you don't have to deliver anything, right? You deliver a demo, you don't have production, right? In production, for production level systems, right, you're supposed to deliver and you have this credit. But you can't base your decision on what you're going to deliver in 12 months or however long your development cycle is on like the tech today. You should be constantly evolving. That doesn't mean that you couldn't run on Fabric 1.1, for example, but why would if we're releasing Fabric versions every quarter and I'm not delivering for 6 quarters, why would you 6 quarters later still be running on Fabric 1.1, as an example, right? So you have to have this adjustment of like technical innovation aligned with the business, right? So that you can stay aligned and keep going and stay ahead. So those were some of the key lessons that we actually learned on that project. We did another project with SecureKey, which was basically an attribute sharing, trusted identity attribute sharing type network with a bunch of banks 7 banks in Canada. And the basic use case, compelling use case for them, right, was, hey, if I've already been KYC'd, I'll make up a word, but KYC'd by TD Bank, and I want to go open up a, Rogers, telephone account or vice versa, do we really have to go through all that information? Or can I leverage my TD information that they're willing to share, that this guy really lives at this address, he has this account with Rogers, right, and vice versa, right? Or if I have a TD account and I want to open up an Orange account or an RBC account, for some other type of financial instrument, why, go through the process again? So this whole idea was about how do I share that information, right? Set up the rules for sharing that information, and then also make sure that you didn't actually want to know where that information came from, right? So the person who requested the information and shared it, RBC shouldn't know that it came from TD, but they just know that it came from somebody who was allowed to provide attestation for the address. So again, a compelling use case. Now, so they had a use case. The technical pieces were tough, right? But fundamentally, bigger problem here than the technical delivery, and this goes back to my last point, was it takes a long time to get all these folks to agree on all the rules, what they're going to do. It goes to their systems people, their security people. Somebody else comes up with some new requirement. These things take a long time, right? The other nice thing on the approach with SecureKey was that, hey, there were features that they wanted in Fabric, right? So if you are a tech shop and you want stuff in there, the fact that the code's open source, we said, hey, we'll help design it. We actually put some people on it. But hey, you guys can contribute those features, right? Don't fork the code. Don't create your custom stuff. Just contribute the features to open source, right? Which, again, benefits the community and yourselves. These were the other thing here was once they got past all the legal work and all the stuff that was in there, it really was, hey, for those of you who know Fabric, it's like, hey, I don't want like SecureKey or IBM to be the one who sets up all the channels, right? I don't want to be we don't trust those guys to do it. We want to like have hands on keyboard and go do it, right? So they actually went and used they had like a formal process. They showed when the CA was generated, they actually go in, create their org. They literally go in, create their channels. I want to have my channel with these 3 banks. Those banks create it. They do the whole process themselves, right? They actually work through everything. It's all, under their control. So actually having that sort of governance that kind of met what was written down and seeing it actually made people feel a lot, it worked, and it made people feel, that they were actually part of the whole process. And then this was an example where I think we made some mistakes in trying to accelerate various things, right? In the end, we found that if we had more stayed on the course of where the Fabric roadmap was going, where the IBM Blockchain Platform was going, and the alignment of the issues up top, things would have rolled, much smoother, right? So I think that's the key thing of like having technology line of business in these innovative and emerging technologies kind of align on the roadmap, right, and have these type of discussions. The WeTrade, which you've probably read about, was more of a trade finance use case. So again, a bunch of banks got together, had a compelling need to sort of, share, credit and information, across the board. This was an interesting one as well. It again had the same kind of issues because a new entity needed to be created, from these banks, had to have a governance policy. There's actually people in here who actually worked on the governance stuff, like one poor guy who's sitting back there. Literally would just be in meetings with these guys about who's going to be the person who issues the certificates. And agreeing on the fact that, in the end they agreed on like Cert Europe was going to be the people who I think who were going to issue all the certificates for all the client applications that were running, right? But just getting all of that stuff lined up, right, takes a lot of time. So that was, very difficult, right? And then making sure that the tech met with it. The other thing that's interesting in this one, especially because they were building a new solution, the other thing to think in mind, the blockchain piece itself only ends up half the time being like 25 to 30%, sometimes even less, of the overall solution, right? Because fundamentally, right, it's not the same thing as like, no offense to Bitcoin, but it's not the same thing as like Bitcoin, which is just like, hey, send a transaction, right? It's pretty easy to build a new client there, right? Here, you're now building a whole thing on porting, workflow. So you have an entire application suite that's built on top of this, right? That actually is, 75% of the time, cost, money, and effort, right, is actually on that compared to the actual parts of writing the smart contracts on the blockchain. So we started to also kind of, notice that as well, right, that people don't, fully plan ahead, thinking that, hey, it's the blockchain piece, I just need blockchain expertise. No, actually, you need some of that to write the smart contracts, but then you need your same standard, typical people that know how to build distributed applications and all the integration points. So that was the keys there. And then, food trust, the last one. This was like, a very, I think, interesting, learning from our perspective, especially on being more on the product side, because we were actually, you can call it, I hate to use these terms, but I'm just going to. We are partially one of the founders of the network of food trust with Walmart, right? So and our model, with Walmart is actually that we are, however the network itself makes money, right? That's how we, IBM, make money. So we do run some of the nodes, et cetera, but it's not a, supplier-provider model, right? We're actually part of the overall network itself, right? So we, of course, had to get the, subject matter expertise on food trust coming from Walmart, building out the actual network itself. But now we actually have to go and work with partners, et cetera, to bring in to actually get people. The only way that we kind of make money is when the network gets more people, and more people start paying for the data, et cetera, right? Which gives us an interesting perspective on how the sort of business model, the technical part wasn't the hard part per se, right? It's really the business model that becomes, really tricky there. And then, of course, it's a great example of having, both a strong player, right? Walmart has a lot of suppliers, right? So They can, you know, and then that coinciding with the fact that there's just been so many outbreaks, right, recently of like salad, right? I forgot where it came from, right? That traced to a batch of stuff, right? That caused a whole bunch of sicknesses. So, I mean, if you've noticed, I mean, we've advertised food trust a lot, I know, but along that time path, there's been so many different events where being able to at least quickly get back to what was the origin of this food, right, or where did it come from, actually becomes a very compelling event, right, to push this forward, right? And then if you actually have a big place in there, right, you're the main body who has a lot of suppliers, you can actually push to say, hey, which Walmart has done, you know, on their mandate. So that's one of those ones where if you're kind of a compelling event coupled with, you know, somebody who's, I don't know what the term is, but I'll just use like power player, you know, big anchor in this stuff who has that influential partner, can actually, again, push forward on the solution, assuming that blockchain was the right technology, which it kind of is here, right? Because you want to make sure that nobody can, you want to have multiple copies of the records out there, right? So that nobody can come back and actually tamper with one, right? They actually have to go out and modify multiple of them, right? Because the big problem in the chain today is, right, it's document-oriented and people forge documents, right? And they do it after the fact, not just ahead of the fact. So that was I think that's been a, you know, very enlightening experience for us as well. So I guess I left about, I stand 4 minutes between you and lunch, but I'm happy to take questions. And like I said, we'll be at the booth, you know, later on. So any questions, concerns?
Yeah. I was wondering, you were mentioning that if today I appear in my own network, I can connect it to IBM, right?
Yeah.
And also other cloud provider, like Oracle and Microsoft or this kind of
Yeah,
provider?
so like the question was about being allowed to, if you were running a peer somewhere else in another cloud and connecting it to, you know, some networks or other things that might be running from with an IBM perspective. So yeah, and from a technical perspective, it's all possible today. I think from the offering perspective of actually having like more integrated into the tooling and consoles, that's what we have coming forward over the next quarter. But yeah, and so we plan to actually, I think there's a session later from the Oracle. We actually did some interop work to show what would actually happen if you deploy so I've connected a peer, for example, in the IBM Blockchain Platform has actually joined. I mean, I had to use the Fabric API, but I was able to get enough information from the Oracle Cloud to actually have it join, for example, an ordering service running, you know, in the Oracle network. I was able to take like the AWS peer product that we have and have it register with the CA there. So we've been working on, you know, the various like, you know, interop on that. And then our goal is to build a set of, from IBM, is to build a set of tools as well, right, that allow you to also work with all of those nodes, not just use the Fabric APIs itself. But you can always use those if you feel comfortable.
So I was going to ask a similar question I asked in the last session, which was around, you know, like in food trust, you've got so many competitors. How did you architect the solution to kind of obfuscate the volume that maybe vendor A is having with Walmart and without having, you know, a proliferation maybe of a lot of channels?
Yeah. So I think to a degree, part of it was, you know, the starting point was has generally been, you know, kind of channels to a degree. Part of what's been going on is not going too many levels down. So you only take like kind of the tier one kind of suppliers, right, you know, at first. As we move forward, we're probably going to be looking more at what we can do on the sort of encryption and potentially on some zero knowledge things. So some of that might actually be, there's some research work going on in terms of actually like hashing proof, like basically hashing proofs of the documents themselves that are out there so that you don't have to actually store that information on the blockchain, but that it's referenced and certain people can, you know, obtain it if they need to and you have that full history. So we started out currently more with like channels. All the data itself is encrypted and then we provide access control on that. But that, like you said, that's not going to fully scale as you try to build the whole massive chain, but for the tier one and tier two suppliers, that part works well. And it makes sense to probably keep those out as channels anyway, because those are the kind of supply lines that would go. But then if we want to start adding more and more players to that, we're looking at some other crypto beyond encryption for that.
Sure.
Yeah, the scale at which you're doing things, sooner or later you would encounter performance bottlenecks, probably in the blockchain layer. So how are you going to encounter that? And is there anything that you can share about performance related?
Yeah, so the question, oh yeah, you guys are in the mic, so. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things that, affect, performance, right? So there's, especially as you start to spread things out, right? You obviously, that's where latency can come, more into the mix, right? But on the overall, I think throughput side of things, right? We've been working, I think, purely on the sort of fabric side, right? To be able to, how do we more parallelize operations? How do we make them, how do we make some things that were traditionally sequential? How can we make certain things, run in parallel and be non-sequential? I think the other case is right now we have a kind of a generic processing model. So, you can kind of, the chain code model that we have today allows you to run kind of generic smart contracts. You can kind of do anything you want. So for example, work that we're doing specifically on like fungible tokens, we're actually building a purpose-built transaction model for fungible tokens within Fabric and integrating those within chain code. So it's kind of both approaches, right? To look at if there's like specific use cases that we know and common things, we can actually build more optimistic. We can build a more optimistic code path anyway because we have custom transaction processing that we can do. On the other side, most of this stuff is eliminating contention, within the system, itself, right, and figuring out how to parallelize, the throughput and operations. And then we have a lot of those. So we do a lot of that work on the, open source side. There's some work on the Copper and other projects out there, and we've been doing a lot of that work, internally. As well, from an IBM perspective, looking to push that back in.
I have a question regarding the composer. As far as I know, WeTrade, they use the composer for going productive.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the other project? Did they use composer? And composer is not mentioned very often here, and there are some rumors. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So these three, so WeTrade used it, SecureKey didn't. So only WeTrade actually used Composer. At the time, Composer, when we started CLS, Composer didn't exist. And SecureKey guys are really smart, so they just write code themselves. And actually, most of the code was Go and Java was written for Food Trust. Yeah, so I didn't mention Composer. That's why I kind of snuck in the VS Code thing. So we're not moving Composer itself as it stands today, like forward. What we learned is, doing it. There's some good features and functions in Composer, but they were written on top of and outside of Fabric, right? So, for example, like if you wanted to, we kept having to expose chain code functions, through, even though you could pass through onto the shim, or if new features came in, and it was adding a layer of, abstraction that was hurting actually potentially performance and maintenance. So the model going forward, and you'll see this in 1.4 on the Node chain code side and the Node.js SDK side, is to take all the learnings from Composer and more embed those as a higher level API on the client SDKs. We'll still have for you guys, don't worry, for the people who love to write low level plumbing, that'll still be there for you. You can figure out what peers you want to send things to. We won't take that away, but we'll write that higher level, into there. And then on the chain code side, it's basically more of an inversion, right? Where now we write, those become libraries that you can use within core chain code. So you can choose to mix and match, right? So if you choose to write a higher level library and then you need to drill down to a low level function, you can. So that's the model going forward. We're doing Node first, only because most of this stuff, the Composer model was more Node and Node. I think we have pretty good, use cases in 1.4. As we refine that, we'll move that model into the other languages as well.
And will there some support regarding automatic generation of REST API and things like that?
Yeah, so the auto client. Yeah, so that's one of the key things, right? The auto generation of the sort of client stubs. Yeah, that'll still be there.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Gary. Sorry, one quick clarification, I suppose. You were talking about what's coming in Q1, Q2. Did that apply to, was it Google Private Cloud, or is it Google Chain Platform you're talking about? And is it, some of those things already run on AWS already? It's just
so it's really where the stuff distributed by IBM would be. So yeah, I mean, we have the stuff running on, so there's an IBM, get support and license product from IBM for like AWS today. IBM Cloud Private runs on AWS and Azure today. We'll do AKS and AWS will be, AKS and EKS will be doing in probably 2Q. Google, I don't know when we'll do, but we could. It just comes down to whoever asks for what when. But the real thing comes down to the key point in there is the fact that we go basically Kubernetes native. And the second we go Kubernetes native, all we really have to do is deploy our tool, basically our kind of deployment tool into Kubernetes. And then it will have to have a permission to basically, in whatever namespace it's in, to run the kube APIs, because we'll basically have operators under the covers. And then it'll be able to provision into anything. So essentially, once we actually get that done, then it just becomes basically a testing case, right? I mean, because literally we'll just deploy the same thing into native kube and use the kube APIs. So the only small difference will probably be two things. Will be if there's almost everybody gives us access to kube control. Some might make us do it as an operator, might make us use pure deploying stuff as an operator versus Helm charts if they're allowed. And then the other will be mapping what type of persistent volume claims and storage we want to use and making sure that's supported. But from that perspective, I anticipate that once we get the work done in 1Q, we'll be able to roll on any kube platform. That's my dream. That's my dream, at least.
Will that include the containers for the smart contract?
Yeah. So right now we use Docker and Docker for that, but we're actually looking at a different model where we actually just deploy chain code as containers themselves for kube and run them as kube deployments.
Is that Q1, Q2?
That's a Fabric thing. I would love it to be 1Q, but probably 2Q. But it could be faster if anybody wants to help. I should make that statement. We know how to do it. And Mark really wants it, so you should go talk to that guy back there. Any other questions?
So do you think that deploying blockchain on multi-cloud will be mentioned afterwards, as people may think deploy blockchain on multiple cloud service provider is a more decentralized way, as no single cloud service provider will access the home nodes in the network.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think we'll see people deploying combinations.
So it is your vision or the customers willing right now?
Yeah. I mean, so we're at one point, but I think that more is going to move to. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make. I mean, you don't want to run. If you can run everything in a single cloud in the same place, you might as well just run a centralized database, and it'd probably be faster and more efficient.
Yeah.
By the way, as a side chain, if you can use a centralized beta database and solve your problem, I highly recommend it. But
yeah,
just because I'm not, I build blockchains, but that's the solution in there. But yeah, I think more and more that's what we're seeing, right? People have their own preferences and choices, and also for the integrity of the overall network, right?
Yeah.
Being able to. I think as apps become more and more mission critical, right? People are going to have more concerns that if it requires like 5 peers to come to consensus on something, right? Yeah. You don't, and you need to have, or even was like 3 out of 5, right? How do I make sure that those are available? So, I mean, people should probably, if you really wanted to be paranoid about it, you should actually go and figure out who the ISP providers are, where all the peering is, blah, 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 right? And actually start looking at the overall, like, low-level networking stuff to pick, which data centers and locations you should actually be in. But yeah, that's the direction that we see.
Thanks.
Anything else? All right, well, I thank you, and like I said, we'll be by the booth later if you need us. Thanks a lot.